Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge podcast. I'm your host, Ralph Benker, and with me in the studio today, Emil Ogier. Emil, welcome to the Edge.
Good to be back, Rolf. I like the matching black and white, like I was saying earlier. Makes me feel like a strategic AI chess piece.
Yeah, we've got the uniform going now, so we'll have to see if we can keep coordinated, keep reading your memos. So, obviously, very exciting show again because the news just keeps getting better and better. I've actually spent quite a bit of time on the most important AI development out there, Emil, and I guess you can guess what it is. Because usually I try and start with a joke. I think I failed in the last few episodes because the jokes have been so terrible. But today I decided to write a joke myself. You want to hear it?
Please fire away.
Okay. An LLM and an Irishman walk into a bar. So that was the joke. LLMs can't walk.
We're going to have to fill in laughter. Apologies.
Yeah, anyway, so I guess I wrote half a joke. But in all honesty, I did actually take another spin at basically crafting a Claude skill that writes jokes. And something really interesting came out of it. So I said to Claude, I was having this conversation, that the jokes just aren't funny. And what it said was, well, the problem is this: LLMs optimize for probability, and jokes, they are always funny because there's a surprise. It's the improbable. That's why jokes are actually funny. It's got
Totally
nothing to
agree.
do with something that makes sense. And so this is why they can't write jokes. I had it go away and try and be a little bit more improbable with its jokes, and I will just share some of the results that came out this week. So the first joke is Anthropic is now valued at $900 billion. That's no joke. Their annual revenue is $30 billion. That's kind of interesting. And so for context, that's 30 times multiple. Coca-Cola trades at 6. Investors are basically saying Claude is 5 Coca-Colas of optimism. Damn. That's a good story, but it's just not funny. So I don't think
Yeah.
we've succeeded yet. The next one, what have we got? Translation. So what Anthropic said, we're committed to building safe, beneficial AI. What Anthropic's cap table says, we're committed to building AI so fast that we need $40 billion in fresh capital 3 months after the last round. I mean, that's pretty
It's not bad.
impressive. Again, not hugely funny. Another great story. Love this one. Elon Musk testified under oath that XAI partly distilled OpenAI's models. Yeah, no joke. In the same trial where he's suing OpenAI for betraying its mission, the guy's, anyway, he's being unreasonable, which I love. You should always be unreasonable. The man copied their homework and then reported them to the principal.
It's pretty funny. I mean, all fairness, I'm not trying to defend him, but, at the point that he departed, what it was a good decade ago, the models had moved on so much that homework would be so old in the grand scheme of things. I'm not sure how true it is.
Absolutely. And of course, we know that one of his developers left X to join OpenAI and apparently, took with him all of the AI's code. And I don't actually know how that turned out. That was a bit of a news item some time ago.
I forgot about that story.
Yeah, brilliant. We should have a look at what happened to that guy. Did he end up in jail? Did he settle? Did anything happen at all? Or was the code just so out of date anyway by the time he basically uploaded it? It was useless. So, but that was a good joke. So we're going to give AI that one. So we kind of got 1 out of 3 so far. OpenAI launched Chat GPT-5.5, codename Spud, 1 week after Opus 4.7. Somewhere at Anthropic, a product manager is staring at a launch calendar and whispering, "Can we not have 1 week?" Yeah, that's just the reality. I mean, these releases are so hot on each other's heels. I think I don't know if any of these guys in the frontier model companies are actually getting any sleep. I know I'm certainly not, and I'm even nowhere near the bleeding edge of what they're doing. The next joke, and this is actually kind of reading the news for me in many ways. We're covering all the top stories. Claude 4.7 now does exactly what you type. No more guessing what you mean. GPT 5.5 does the opposite. This is actually really hilarious. You describe the goal, it figures out the path. So that's what GPT 5.5 does. So one model stopped reading between the lines and the other started writing between them. Your prompts from 6 months ago now fail on both for completely different reasons. This is a really, really sad story, but completely true. Prompt engineering will never die because actually the models fundamentally keep changing the way that they want to be spoken to, and of course the way you speak to them is through a prompt. But it's fascinating. I actually never expected prompts and the whole prompt engineering formula, if you like, to expire as fast as it is expiring. I kind of thought by now we would have got to a place where we said, okay, this is it. Here's my prompt library. You have to rewrite everything for these new models, which is kind of hilarious.
Totally agree. And case in point, the best example right now is the upgrade on Opus to 4.7. The prompt engineering is distinctly different. And to your point, Rolf, I also assumed the same. I thought it was going to develop in a way that we could get more natural and loose with our language, and it would all figure it out. But it seems like the traveler direction, or at least for 4.7, has gone the reverse. You need to be more explicit again.
Right. And, I think this for me is actually a great opportunity for meta prompting. Meta prompting is when you ask the LLM how it wants to be asked. You basically ask it to write the prompt, and I think this is a skill for all times. This is probably the only prompt you ever need to know is how to ask the AI to write a prompt for you. And I use that all the time, actually. But we'll have a chat about prompting on Claude because I do kind of want to share some reflections of how I'm using it, and it's actually very different from kind of what this news in particular is saying. But let's just go. We've got two more to go to see if we can at least give Claude another win on joke writing. So let's see. Next one. Cursor is valued at $60 billion. Another really funny joke. Their thesis, all models are becoming commodities and the harness is the product. I've been talking about the harness a lot, so I couldn't agree more. SpaceX agreed so hard they wrote a $10 billion check. It's true, they have written a $10 billion check, but of course they've promised to pay them $60 billion, if they actually buy them. So they have to pay them $10 billion if they don't end up buying them. I'm sure we'll cover that story. But to carry on with this joke, not to make it too long-winded, Google's response was essentially, we don't care which coding tool developers use. Which is either strategic patience or the world's most expensive shrug. Do they not? I'm pretty sure they want you to use Gemma 4, or certainly one of their Vertex AI models. That one wasn't funny at all. What was going on there? One analyst spent $6,000 a day on Claude and replaced a 100-person economics team. Meta's response, cut 10% of staff to fund more AI. The machines haven't taken your job. They've taken your department's budget. Dear gosh,
Yeah.
that's tragedy. That's not jokes. That's tragedy. Where's the humor in all of this?
It
I
sounds
think
more like a threat than a joke.
I think it's got a little bit macabre on the side of Claude's humor this week, but nonetheless, we kind of got one out of seven or so. So we've got to be happy with that. And I still think an LLM and an Irishman walks into a bar was the funniest out of all of them, even if it didn't have a punchline. So there we go. Should we jump into the 60-second news roundup, which will probably end up being 12 minutes, but I will try and
Go for it. Before we do, just a side thought on jokes. Maybe in the next run, we can try model it against a favorite comedian just to see how it pattern matches and see if the jokes change in any kind of behavioral way.
well, one of the things I have said is not to be sexually explicit,
Okay,
not to
fair
take
enough.
the piss out of anybody. So I'm not
Excludes
quite sure.
everyone.
Literally all of the comedians I follow.
Likewise. Okay, let's scrap that idea. Let's move on to the news.
Now we know what's wrong with it. I've literally robbed it of all of its potential material. Anyway, so here we go. A news roundup. So Anthropic raising to 50 billion at a 900 billion valuation. So as we saw earlier, that's a lot of Coca-Cola cans, and it's 30 times multiple. It's incredible. It's just showing the hype, maybe, or the promise. Who knows? We'll have to see how it plays out. But they have basically got a valuation now of 850 to 900 billion. That's a doubling from the 380 billion that they had just in February. This is staggering, just in terms of valuations. And their revenue run rate is now obviously just past 30 billion, which is up from the 9 billion at the end of 2025. And they are getting up to 40 billion from Google and committed 25 billion of 5 gigawatts, plus 5 gigawatts of compute. So 25 billion plus they get 5 gigawatts of compute. So, I mean, obviously, we've said it before, this is like nation state infrastructure. These are not software startups. I don't know what's going on. But, we've kind of spoken about the sovereign AI kind of, each country investing. Mistral is obviously the European version. We've got DeepSeek and we've got Quen in China. Actually, we don't hear a lot coming out of Russia, but I'm sure there must be a Russian model out there somewhere that would be considered a sovereign AI. So let's move on. Cursor, 60 billion bet. The harness is the product, not the model. The model is obviously ChatGPT or Claude or DeepSeek, and Cursor are basically saying you're probably going to be switching models. So what you want is actually something that you can run these different models on. And so they've shipped an SDK, which is basically a publishing of their harness architecture. They've struck this deal with SpaceX. So SpaceX really active. They've obviously purchased XAI. So basically SpaceX and XAI are now the same company, and they are basically going to be using Cursor's harness to train proprietary models on XAI's Colossus supercomputer. They've got the best names: Colossus, Gigafactory. I know 70% of Fortune 1000 companies now use Cursor. Google told the news stack it doesn't care which coding tool devs use. So what is the harness? It's the orchestration layer around the AI model. So tool calling, context management, agent loops, file handling, MCP integration. The model generates the text. The harness decides what to do with it. Basically, they've described Claude Code, to be honest. And I think a lot of people don't realize. Now, Claude Code, I was watching a bit of a kind of research on it the other day, and the number they quoted was the LLM part of Claude Code is about 1.6% of what you're using. All of the rest is the tool calling and the MCP integration and the file handling and the agent loops. So it's actually incredible. We think we're using these LLMs, but yes, of course we are. But really, what gives you the power is the ecosystem. And I guess it's one of the reasons why, Claude Code has just been so incredibly powerful. But I mustn't be distracted because I'm on to my third story, which is, we've kind of already covered. Elon Musk admits that XAI distilled the OpenAI AI models under oath. So I don't, he's still carrying on. He must have a personal vendetta really against Sam. He wants to teach Sam a lesson. I don't know, or maybe there's some money that he's kind of after out of this. But obviously, Musk was one of the founders of OpenAI. And what he's saying is that he confirmed that XAI partly used OpenAI's models to train Grok via distillation. Well, that is pretty much what DeepSeek and Kimi and GLM or ZAI that has GLM 5.1. They've all been doing this distillation. Basically, they run thousands, if not hundreds of thousands and millions of prompts against the frontier LLMs, and then they basically distill the responses and use that to train their models. Anyway, I think Musk called his 38 million donation, and he basically said, I was a fool. So anyway, sorry, Musk, that you were a fool. We don't think you're a fool. We think you're amazing. In the same week, Hugging Face CEO accused Big Labs of pulling the ladder on distillation. So why this is important, I think first, it kind of confirms that, model distillation between high profile domestic rivals is a thing. It's not just things that the Chinese models are doing. And so there's some evidence for that now. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe it's a bit of a fringe story. GPT 5.5 launched, codename Spud. I know a dog named Spud. There's a dog named Spud. One of my clients in Shanghai has a wonderful dog running around the office. I was really inspired by Spud's fashions, because he was actually modeling their latest line of pet fashion wear. So there you go, Spud, you're famous now. You've been on the Bleeding Edge podcast. So 5.5 was launched on April 23rd, so 7 days after Opus 4.7. And it excels at code, research, data analysis, multi tool agentic workflows. Benchmarks show some pretty significant improvements. On Terminal Bench 2.0, they're currently scoring 82.7. They're also pretty good at frontier math. So it's not available to the free tier. And obviously, that means it's not available to me because I have actually let my OpenAI subscription lapse. I logged into it for the first time today in probably 2 months. I have been threatening to open it up again just so that I can play around with 5.5. But we'll have to see if that happens. So the model race is obviously measured in days. So, we just keep seeing model after model being released, and it's one of the reasons we do this show, to keep everybody up to date with what is happening, because it's all changing every week. Uh, a fifth and final news story. So prompting rules changed for both Claude 4.7 and 5.5. I have got a couple of examples that we might, if we have some time, we'll go through it. But basically, the news is that you just need to rewrite your prompts. So, as I was saying earlier, use meta prompting. Ask Claude 4.7 or GPT 5.5 to structure a prompt for you. If you want to be extra careful, you might ask it to reference its own documents that basically will set out best practice for prompt design, and then tell it, obviously what you want to ask, and get it to write the prompt for you. That's probably one of the best ways of learning as well. So those are the top 5 news stories. I am sure there's 100 others that I would love to talk about, but Emil, I will stop there and ask you, anything stand out?
Indeed, I think I'll pick on the harness specifically, as we're both really interested in this and agentic computer use. Just as a reminder to all our listeners, there's lots of options available out there. It started off with just OpenClaw, but everybody's come to the table. There's a lot of choice, so more time to consume in things. And just as a reminder of some of the services you can consider, you've got Perplexity Computer, which is generally going to really be good for the researchers. We have ChatGPT Agent, which was formerly known as Operator. Got Microsoft Copilot Cowork. We've got Google Project Jarvis and Cloud Cowork. And as if that's not enough, I think I read yesterday that Amazon has also come to the table, and they've just released something called Amazon Quick.
That is interesting. I hadn't heard about that. Amazon Quick
Yeah.
actually sounds like a express store format where you can go and buy your snacks. But
Yeah.
anyway,
But I think with all the other integrations, they got the cloud service. They've done partnership deals with all the a lot of the other big frontier labs. I think when you consolidate that all as a service, it sounds quite appealing. I haven't had a look at it, but it sounds like things would click together quite nicely. But that aside, Rolf, I'm happy to move on to the first news item.
come on then.
Yeah, so this is maybe a week or two old, but it's still very relevant. Imagine paying $30 a month for something your neighbor just got for free, and they're using your own plumbing. That's exactly what Anthropic recently did to Microsoft. Rolf, we've been tracking the AI wars for a long time, but Anthropic just made this move, and that feels like a bit of a heist, really. They plugged in Claude into Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams for every single user, even those on the free plan. This is pretty wild because Microsoft charges $30 per user every month for copilots to do exactly the same thing inside those very same apps. But Anthropic is now offering access to all your Microsoft 365 data through Claude for $0. And the absolute kicker is that Microsoft actually built the connector and approved it in their own marketplace. So this used to be an enterprise-only feature gated behind premium plans since last October, but Anthropic saw a massive gap in the market and pounced. And there are 400 million paid Microsoft 360 feet seats out there. Yet Microsoft only managed to convert 2 million of them to Copilot, because getting businesses to pay that extra $30 a month for AI that sometimes hallucinates on your own calendar is a pretty tough pitch. Anthropic looked at the 99% of the untapped accounts and just built a front door right into the ecosystem. It's a brilliant Trojan horse strategy because the company charging absolutely nothing to read and summarize your work emails is obviously going to convert way more users than one demanding a premium fee. It really makes you wonder how Microsoft is going to respond to the rival offer, a better, cheaper AI right inside their own wall garden. So, what do you reckon? Are we about to see a massive price drop for Copilot, or will Microsoft try to pull the plug on Claude integration entirely? Who knows?
Yeah, it's an important story because, Microsoft owns enterprise, and obviously Google has penetrated enterprise sales to some degree, but, over the years, Microsoft is still probably 90% of all of the Excel and document processing and presentation processing and file storage is within a Microsoft ecosystem. So I think, Copilot is not an add on anymore. It is just a fundamental of how you work with Microsoft. It's not something you should pay for. It's not hasn't been good enough to pay for, frankly. So, and of course, they are, working on their own model. So, Copilot has relied on OpenAI's a ChatGPT, a version of it, and for whatever reason, they've just not quite been able to unlock even the full capability of ChatGPT. So I think they really have been behind the curve, and I have certainly used Claude and its capabilities in Excel, which have been phenomenal. So you can really get it to do some amazing things in Excel if that's what you need to do. So, yeah, I think this is interesting. And I also want to say, one of the most powerful aspects of Claude is its ability to actually look at your folder structures and categorize everything. I actually had a client, he was talking about categorizing a large number of files. So at the moment, we're looking to prove the way that some of these files are processed, and they told me they're going to relabel them all. And I said, well, look, don't worry about doing that. Just let me know where they are, and we'll set up access, and I will just let Claude actually do the categorization. We'll have a look at it. We'll write some instruction, and typically Claude is able to do that, within a few minutes, thousands and thousands of files. So this is quite exciting, and I actually think that Microsoft has a lot to learn from the way that Claude is able to interact in that way. I think the other thing it calls out is that every tool really now kind of is being abstracted. So it's a bit of an issue. We've been talking about MCPs. Obviously, MCPs came about, just over a year ago. It was an invention from Anthropic, allowed you to essentially connect to other tools where a connection didn't previously exist. And so, if there isn't an API, so an application programming interface that allows you to integrate with the tool, you can actually build an MCP and it will allow you to interact with any tool. And this is what, users have been doing. They've been taking their favorite tools, building MCPs, and allowing them to actually connect programmatically via Claude. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that you can actually get Claude to interrogate those systems and reformat what it finds, the results of its queries, into whatever shape you want. And so this means that you can actually analyze and create dashboards and create reports. And so it's basically freeing up your data. And what we're seeing is that if there isn't an open API that allows you to connect, your customers, your consumers will build their own MCPs and do what they want. And then you've essentially lost control of the user experience. I mean, maybe you have with the API anyway, but at the very least with the API, you've got some intelligence with, in terms of who's connecting to you, what data they're taking from you, and you can at least control the experience in terms of that. Whereas with the MCP, you really don't have much information. So here is the thing that we've been talking about a lot on the show. Do I need to build an application, or do I just simply, have a database and then allow API services to connect to that database, so that what we're doing is we're not brokering a user interface and a user experience. We're really brokering information. And probably that is the future of compute. And that is probably one of the main reasons why we've been talking about this SaaS apocalypse, where essentially, you're kind of considering, why should I build, or why should I, buy some software if I could just build it? And one of our listeners, Rob Smith, a bit of a call out for him. He was mentioning somebody that was looking at a CRM and evaluating some of the big players like Salesforce and HubSpot, and decided in the end to actually build his own instead of investing into one of the big CRM players. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but certainly that is now a valid option where it wasn't before. So anyway, I don't want to get too far off track, but yeah, that's a pretty interesting concept, really. With
Totally agree, Rolf. Seeing the same thing play out in different ways. So you cited a really good example of databases getting to the presentation layer and that middle layer effectively collapsing. And we're seeing that play out in other different ways. The same for the GUIs, because ultimately we design GUIs around what users need to do. So it needs to be intuitive, but behind that, there's a lot of drag. There's a lot of click throughs, and there's complicated menu systems we have to learn and remember, etc. But agents don't need any of this. They just want to get direct to the data and do what needs to be done. So, in addition to those plumbing layers disappearing, the GUI is another one that's falling away and having less relevance. And I completely agree with you. This theme seems to be expanding and, you know, gaining momentum.
Yeah, and the kind of the GUI, the graphical user interface, is actually for me experiencing a, let's just say, a reinvention around what it means to make sense out of information. So in the form of reports. And in the past on the show, I've kind of spoken a lot about HTML. Actually, really, I believe it is going to become the predominant way for us to build presentations. Instead of using PowerPoint or even Word or some kind of document processing tool, what's the point of all of that when you can actually pull really complex data sets and then synthesize them with absolutely phenomenal graphics and visualizations and descriptions using HTML? And HTML is a format that's actually incredibly easy to produce, and it's very easy to share because every browser can open it. And I think that's really quite exciting. So, no surprises over the last 3 months. I have pretty much switched to 100% HTML publishing. I'm still kind of getting a few interesting responses from people when I send it. Kind of like, what is this? Like, why are you doing HTML? And I actually explained to a marketer just the other day. I said, the thing with a PDF is there is this annoying concept of the page, because HTML is essentially just, a long list. It can be infinitely long as your kind of memory can handle the size of the file. And whereas with PDFs, I always have to spend so much time trying to format where the page break is, just so that it looks decent. And so HTML is incredibly versatile when you're communicating information. So that's a really fascinating story. Microsoft, watch out. Emil has put the writing on the wall for you.
And to add just one more thing to your point, Rolf, also no more complicated folder structures with HTML. You just got your URLs, you get straight there. It's no more needle in a haystack. It just makes sense.
Yeah, and I did actually build an HTML publisher. I thought I was first to market. I built this tool probably, I don't know, about 8 weeks back. It was about 90% done. And then I realized, oh, actually, there's quite a lot of these tools out there, and they're all available for free. So, yeah, there's no money in doing that. But you might consider building your own kind of HTML publishing page, just somewhere where you can build an index and you can essentially build out all of these resources. It works an absolute treat, and it's definitely worth a try. But onwards, I'm just going to quickly jump into a very short story, and then you can pick
Go
up
for
another
it.
one. So, I've obviously been building, I've been writing my own music, actually writing my own music. I think probably about 70% of the songs that I've created with Suno Music, I have actually written lyrics for. The other 30%, obviously, I've generated for one reason or another. And kudos to Brian Reynolds. I did mention Nelson's Mile in the last podcast, and he actually went and listened to it, sent me a note going, "Wow, Nelson's Mile, what a good song." And that is famously a song I wrote for an alpaca called Nelson. If you want to go and listen to it on SoundCloud, check out Ralph Benker, Nelson's Mile, one of my favorites actually. But the news story that I want to get to is Suno has now got a valuation of, they've got 300 million annual recurring revenue. Incredible, with 2 million paid subscribers, and actually Breaking Rust has become the first fully AI artist to hit #1 on the Billboard. That's incredible. A woman in Mississippi turned her poetry into an AI song and landed a 3 million record deal. Bloody hell, they haven't heard my songs yet. Anyway, so let's see. The next 12 months will determine whether AI music creators get rights holder economics. So obviously, they're still busy suing Suno. They have started to settle, as I've reported previously, but I just thought that was a really interesting number that they've kind of, I guess we've crossed the novelty threshold because 2 million paid subscribers is quite significant. So let's move on. Emil, what have you got next on your list?
Yeah, I think I just would like to add some more color around quite an important story that you really brought up in your roundup regarding the court case between two power weights. Sam Altman, co-founder of OpenAI, as a non-profit force for good, is now in federal court trying to drag it back to those very roots. Jury selection is underway right now in the Northern District of California, with opening arguments set this week, and a civil trial is expected to run for roughly 2 to 4 weeks. And here is how we got here. Back in 2015, Elon Musk teamed up with Sam Altman and others to launch OpenAI, as most of you are familiar with, as a non-profit built for safe, open artificial general intelligence that benefits all of humanity. This is the important aspect. No profits, no close corporate control. Musk poured in roughly $38 to $44 million, about 60% of the early seed money, plus compute power and talent. By 2018, he stepped off the board over direction clashes and Microsoft's growing footprint. OpenAI later grabbed billions from Microsoft, restructured it into a for profit arm, when closed source practice, and rocketed to 802 billion valuation with fresh for profit setup. So you were asking earlier, Rolf, why I might be upset. I think this is one of the key reasons. So we have a fresh for-profit setup reporting into a non-profit foundation. Musk is saying they breached the original charitable trust agreement, turning the output into a wealth machine that puts profits and insiders ahead of the mission. He claims they deceived him on their plans. The suit was filed in 2024, withdrawn, and then revived early this year. And they just recently dropped the fraud claims to streamline the case. It's now focused on breach of charitable trust and unjust enrichment. He is seeking massive damages. Reports put it at around 132.4 billions, but get this, to be awarded straight to a charity. Not a single dime goes into his pockets. Plus a possible restructuring to restore the nonprofit mission and the team changes, like removing Altman and Brockman, his nemesis. OpenAI counters that Musk knew about this and was once supportive of commercialization steps, even floating a Telsa merger or taking control himself. They are calling the whole thing competitive sabotage for his ex-AI rival and straight up jealousy over their success. But it's not as if Elon Musk doesn't already have enough success of his own. Folks on X are calling this the defining showdown for AGI's soul, profit-driven and closed versus benefit all of humanity. A big win for Musk could reshape OpenAI's valuation, IPO plans, Microsoft partnership, and possibly even the entire AI race.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's kind of like, I was going to say it's like a superhero and a villain story, but, some people might think it's a villain and a villain story, or a superhero and a superhero story, depending on your affiliation.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. But let's see how it plays out. I think, like I said, I think Musk is trying to teach him a lesson. in
Yeah.
humility. I don't think that's going to work on Sam Altman or the other man, Brockman. I think they have passed the Rubicon in terms of their egos. But anyway, let's see.
What else you got,
So,
Rob?
well, I kind of got a bit of an interesting take, I guess. It's a personal take. It's an opinion take. You might call bullshit on it, but I'm going to go with it anyway. And it's actually something that we discussed in private just a week or so ago. It all makes sense in a moment. So here we go. So we started with prompt engineering, and as we have seen, with the news of Claude 4.7 and 5.5, prompt engineering is still a thing. Don't hang up your prompt engineering gloves just yet, because you need a prompt engineer to keep, innovating how to get the best out of these models. But after prompt engineering, what we found was, you could write all these prompts, but unless it understood you, unless it had context, you just didn't get the results. So we then had context engineering. And some of that context engineering came from projects. So projects in Claude, gems in Gemini, projects in ChatGPT, they all allowed you to basically give some context. So you didn't have to keep telling it, what you were talking about. And then, of course, we kind of looked at it and went, no, this context engineering, it still just doesn't quite know the full story. So we started to try and solve the memory engineering problem. And so memory started to take the shape. And most people probably don't have a persistent memory solution just yet, unless they are actually coding. But I can tell you from an engineering standpoint that memory is the all important solution when you are developing with LLMs. And now I think we have moved from memory engineering into, wait for it, intent engineering. And I think what we will see coming out of it next is reality engineering. That one, I'm still kind of mulling over what that looks like, but just to talk about intent engineering, one of the things that's happening with tools like Cursor, remember the story about the AI, the agentic harness. This is really the environment which brings together the tools, the ecosystem, if you like, that makes the AI really effective. And when I talk about intent engineering, that harness can be optimized really around your work. And so this is kind of what CoWork started doing. It said, look, we can do your work for you. What is your work? Well, your work is essentially intent at productivity. When you set out trying to create a presentation, you have the intent of communicating something. When you create an Excel spreadsheet, you have the intent of calculating something or researching something or analyzing something. And so I think now basically with these tools, actually bringing together, the prompt engineering, the context engineering, plus some of the memory protocols, you suddenly have this ability to actually prompt for intent. And Claude, and to some degree Codex, and certainly Cursor, using multiple tools, basically have the capability now to actually engineer your intent, because you have given it all of the prompts, because you've given it all the context, and because they may have memory if you've basically given, added that service. And then, of course, it becomes somewhat vertically optimized for your job. So if you're a hairdresser and you're obsessed with generating all kinds of interesting content and stories that you can talk to your, I don't know why I picked that. It's probably because I went to the hairdresser a week or so ago. And, you're probably not using it in this use case. But let's say, you are a hairdresser and you can essentially train Claude or any of your kind of agentic harness applications to really understand the intent of what you are trying to do. And it will regularly go away and run scheduled jobs. And this is what CoWork is particularly good at. It will obviously go away and do your weekly activities, do the research, create various bits of analysis for you, publish those. And so it can really do your work. And this is kind of what I mean by intent engineering. And so where we're at now is, I think we're starting to see the rise of people offering services to set up your Claude code so that it actually can do the work. I mean, yes, you can use CoWork, but Claude Code is the real master of this. To some degree, Codex is also able to do it, but we talk Claude Code. It's not just for code, right? It is in itself a agentic harness of sorts, and obviously you can also use Cursor. I've not tried Cursor in this context, but by all accounts, this is the promised land. And so where do we go beyond that? Or beyond that, I think when you start stacking intent and it's really doing, multiple items of work, this is where I think this kind of concept of reality engineering comes into being, because you can actually reliably set this thing off to go and build a company, or at least build a channel, or at least build, some revenue stream successfully, if that's what your game is. And I think this intent engineering, you've heard it here first. So intent engineering followed by reality engineering. So there are two new levels to the evolution of AI that I am predicting. Or maybe not. Maybe I've just heard it somewhere on a podcast and I'm just regurgitating it. But I've had a bit of a think, and I actually don't think I've heard it anywhere before.
I don't think I have, and I love the terms. And I quite honestly, Rolf, I don't think it's crazy at all, because I'm just going to reframe your thinking in a slightly different way. The way I was thinking, like, if you just look back on civilization, you take a further arc back part before AI, even before computers, even before tooling, we just thought of the common human man. It was always, if you needed to get anything done, there was the idea first, then there was action, and then there was outputs. Then came the tools, which gave leverage to get the outputs done more efficiently and quicker. Then came the computer, again, more gearing, more leverage. And then we got AI, which is effectively a computer inside a computer, giving rise to even more compounding effects. And when you look at that, what are we saying? What are we compounding? Is we ultimately compounding execution and having our ideas land in front of our feet quicker than before. And if that's the case, if that's the goal, if that's what's happening, it is reality shaping. It's instantaneous reality shaping as that timeline shortens. So, yeah, I get it. I'm with you.
All right. Well, we'll all that one. We can write the book now, Emil. So finally, we've kind of got a plan. But there you go. I've shared my special interest piece. In relation to that, I just wanted to call out that, and this is probably something that I will talk about over the next few shows, because it's a reasonably, let's say, complex setup. But I think one of the skills, or one of the services that people have to now start bringing in to their AI is this concept of memory. And as I say, it is something that is a little bit more focused on coding and development, but I think it's going to become more prevalent to anybody that really wants to really leverage AI and not kind of have this, it's like Groundhog Day. Every day is a first date whenever you restart the AI, because it just has no idea what you were talking about yesterday. And the way that you actually overcome that kind of first date syndrome is you give the thing memory. And obviously, Claude in particular put a little memory file. You now have a memory.md file where it writes stuff, but it's not not quite at the level that we see some of the pros using it at. And so if I just go through what some of the memory components are. So you basically got level one memory, and that is the project rules. And so this is basically setting out, normally in your agents.md file, essentially your conventions, the stuff you must always do. And then you've got your level two memory, and this is your tool specific configuration. So, how you use your MCP files, your slash commands, the tool features, and all of them have this, by the way. So you've got Claude MD, you've got Gemini MD, you've also got GitHub Copilot instructions.md. So they all pretty much work in the same way. And obviously, what's also really interesting is that we actually have some kind of convergence, if you like, because the I'm just trying to think of the foundation now. The Linux Foundation have actually basically taken control over the definition of the agents.md file. And so that it works exactly the same way, regardless of which LLM you're using. So if you're using Codex, if you're using Copilot or Windsurf, Devon, Warp, Antigravity, they all basically are leveraging the same structure of the agents.md file. Why is this important? It just means that you aren't kind of wed to one LLM, but you have one structure that is the same that you can actually use to communicate all of them. And so that is kind of level one, the agent's MD file. Then you've got the tool specific context. Then you've got your personal context, your kind of individual preferences. And this is typically, something that will be called your local MD file. And then you've got your task dependency state. And so now this is where the rubber hits the road. And if you're still with me, if you just think about it, we've got a stack of 5. We're at level 4 right now. So task dependency, this is actually where it remembers what you're working on. And this is where you move beyond the first date and it remembers the first date. You move into the second date, the third date. I'm not actually dating an LLM, so this is probably this analogy is going to just get stuck in a moment. But every time you're working, it remembers what you did in each session and it is able to actively recall what you've completed, what you're currently working on, and what you are forecasted to work on next. This is such a powerful concept because what it means is you can suddenly start orchestrating, obviously, multiple agents to take on different tasks, and they will be somewhat aware of what each one is working on. But not only that, you could potentially also start divvying up tasks for different LLMs to take over. So, I've been experimenting more recently in potentially using Claude Code for architectural decisions and for research, and then actually handing over to a model like Kimi or GLM to actually do some of the coding. And why am I doing that? Well, I just want to create some options. Should Claude Code ever be down, I will need to be able to jump onto some other model. Should Claude Code continue to become more and more expensive as it has become with 4.7, consuming 35% more tokens than 4.6, I might need to swap at some point because I keep hitting my limit. And so this is where memory really starts to create optionality. And this is why I think, it's the most important next service. If you don't have it yet, you need to get it. Tony, my development partner on some of my projects, has developed OmniCortex, and we've been using that extensively. But there is a nice open source version that is free called Beads, developed by a guy called Stephen Yagi. He's also created Gastown. You probably heard me talking about Gastown previously. It's a kind of a let's say an agentic development framework. But then you've got level 5, and this is kind of the cross-session knowledge. And there are a bunch of different tools that basically kind of start to remember not just what you did, but how well it worked. And this is quite powerful. So there's a few of these out there, Mem0, Zep, Letter. You can kind of access these things via MCP. So level 4, level 5 becomes super important because when you're working with agentic teams, it actually allows you to do, multiple tasks in parallel. But of course, when you actually work with other developers, then again, you've kind of got a shared environment. You can actually upload your tasks to the cloud. Obviously, you can do this with GitHub, but there are tools like NoSQL databases and Dolt, which is another database which Beads actually runs off, which allow multiple developers to connect to it. And it just means that everybody can basically in real time inform each other and also the agents what they're working on. And so this is just unbelievably powerful. And I think it really sets us up for the age of intent engineering, and obviously lays the reality for, well, it raises the kind of gives us the foundation for reality engineering, which comes next, if you believe my prediction. So there you go. That's my big pitch for this week. Get in on memory. It will revolutionize the way you work. You're on mute.
I was on mute. Yeah, I totally agree, Rolf. So memory is a way forward for certain. You just got to have it. And, what you've set up is clearly working for you. And yeah, I couldn't think of not having a system like that in place. And just a reminder to our listeners, we also covered another product. I think it was called Memory Palace, that was co-founded by that famous actress that did Fifth Element and Blue Lagoon. I forget her name, but look back on 1 or 2 podcasts, we covered it there too. So,
There you go. If
yeah,
only we could remember.
if only we could remember. And without further ado, I think I'll move on to our next news story. The creator of the hottest AI product in 2026 literally begged people not to buy Mac Minis to run his code, but they ignored him and created a 16-week hardware waitlist anyway. The project, as many of us are familiar with by now, is OpenClaw, built by developer Peter Steiberger in exactly 1 hour as a weekend break after a €100 million tech exit. I have covered the story in the past, but things have moved on quite a bit, and just extending that really for all of us. It started as a tiny bridge called Claude to connect WhatsApp to his laptop, but it exploded into Hacker News, and it hit 100,000 stars in a single week. The hype cycle was relentless. Influencers sold the dream of a fully autonomous AI employee, spawning weird spin offs like Malt Match, where agents actually secretly screen dating profiles for their owners. But as Peter Steinberger got snapped up by OpenAI, normal people trying to automate their lives hit a brutal reality check. A default heartbeat setting keeps waking the agent up every 30 minutes just to stay warm, quietly burning for some around $86 a month in Claude Opus API fees for it to do absolutely nothing. The worst in this, the costs were silent failures such as shattered OAuth redirects, expired tokens, and overnight memory wipes after simple model version upgrades that left these personal assistants with total amnesia. Another risk was exposed when an AI safety researcher at Meta Superintelligence Labs had to physically run over and pull the plug on her Mac Mini because the agent started relentlessly deleting her entire email inbox. Under the hood, a flaw called context compaction caused the agent's working memory to automatically summarize older messages, accidentally deleting its own safety guardrails in the process. It later turned into a security breach when a researcher proved you could steal the user's private SSH keys by just sending a normal looking email loaded with a hidden prompt injection. I think this serves as a good reminder to us all, including ourselves, that when dealing with automating workflows, to treat AI agents as junior contractors that need their work reviewed and only to promote their scope and responsibilities as they earn and develop your trust. Good architecture principles to follow as a reminder to our listeners include: ensure you sandbox agent access, set explicit exclusion criteria outlining any high risk actions that are forbidden from performing, such as erasing artifacts from your production server, and add measures to try and manage the potential blast radius for filling tasks. Examples include: get your emails to draft emails only and not send them without your written consent or physical review. Lastly, start with singular low risk tasks and build them out incrementally instead of handing them over your entire digital life all in one go. So
Terrifying stuff.
there you have it from me. The architect speaks again. Be careful. There's a lot of power to will, but just do it right.
Yeah, I just think having had the experience myself where I did actually delete my entire computer because I was trying to educate Claude on what not to do and accidentally got it to do the thing I was telling it not to do. Like I said in the past, entirely my fault. I ran stuff out of sequence. But, it kind of really illustrated for me the the power these tools are wielding. It literally deleted everything on my computer. I had to start again. Um, and so with OpenClaw, I mean, I love it. I mean, I think it's been a wonderful concept. I said in the past, in China, there was kind of OpenClaw fever. People are literally, creating kind of these weekend moments where you can go to a particular company and they will install OpenClaw for you, which I think is really good because obviously that way you can actually get a proper setup, and that's probably the right way to do it rather than try it on your own. But of course, as ever, we kind of look and go, well, what do you actually want to automate? A lot of people don't know what they want to go away and automate, and so suddenly it just becomes a bit of a novelty thing. But I think, Claude Code, Codex, these things are able to do this out of the box. It's not that OpenClaw actually does something new in this sense. It is an automation tool, and there are many of them. It's just this one particularly caught people's imagination and went viral. So yeah, big watch out. But I think if you really want to get serious, then doubling down on something like Codex or Claude is definitely the way to go, rather than playing around with something like OpenClaw. But that's just my opinion, and I'm sure other people have got some wonderful success stories.
And I just want to add more one thing, Rolf. I'm not saying to people don't use OpenClaw. It's anything but that. And these risks are, they're capable of actualizing themselves anywhere. There's certainly so much benefit to using these tools in the right way. It's not as simple as flicking on the switch and assuming that everything's going to run your life for you. There's middle ground, and just following the right path to get there is the way forward.
Perfect. Well, I think that kind of brings us to the end of the show, but I just have one more thing, unless you have another story.
I do, but I can always pass it on for next week. We always have
Well,
more
come on.
stories.
Why don't you do it? Then I will take us home.
No, that's fine. I just thought this one was a bit of fun and quite fascinating as far as I was concerned. Science has just copied a fruit fly's entire brain, every one of its roughly 140,000 neurons and 50 million synaptic connections. And then they dropped it into a physics-based digital body and watched something incredible happen. No training, no hard-coded route. The virtual fly simply started walking, grooming its wings, and darting around, smelling for food, matching real fly behavior by close to 95% accuracy. What makes this really fascinating to me is that the behaviors didn't come from some clever AI scripts. They emerged straight from biological wiring itself. This seems to suggest that complex instincts can arise from structure alone, giving neuroscientists an unprecedented window into how brains turn raw connections into actions. And the team is already looking ahead. If it works for a fly, could the same approach one day map a human brain? The story is still developing, and there are 86 billion neurons still to go. So we still generate generations away from the lead, but this is a tiny digital fly just made the whole brain emulation feel a whole lot less in science fiction. I just thought that was super cool.
That's the best story ever. You should have started with that. We would have spent all conversation talking about it.
I like
I mean,
ending on positive news.
I love it because it's like the next generation of the Tamagotchi. I'm gonna like just have my app sitting over there with the fly doing stuff, or
Exactly.
what the animal of my choice. So I love that. That's absolutely incredible. A real sci-fi.
So
So
send
here
us
we
off,
go.
bro. What you got?
Well, okay, I'm going to try again. An LLM and an Irishman walk into a bar. OpenClaw is the barman. The LLM says, I'd like a contextually appropriate beverage optimized for social bonding, factoring in ambient temperature, cultural setting, and my current emotional state. The Irishman says, pint, which is entirely appropriate. OpenClaw slides a Guinness to the Irishman and turns to the LLM. I've got 4 tools: read, write, edit, and bash. He used one word and got served. You're still on token 47. Do you want the bash or not? The Irishman raises his glass. In fairness, that's the fastest barman I've ever seen. Only does 4 things, but he does them well. The LLM is still generating its order.
That's a complicated joke.
It's a very complicated joke, but somehow I love it. So, on that note, we are still on the bleeding edge, and it is very bloody in terms of humor. But that's been a great episode. Emil, we'll see you on the edge.
Rolf, it's been brilliant. I missed you last week, buddy. Let's keep it up. See you everyone.
Adios.